Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to another episode of Doctors Schuster and Oxley, The Power of Stories. Today, we are joined by our good friend, longtime collaborator, Rohan Radhakrishnan, one half of the quarter proof. I don't know if that makes you a 1/8, but of the quarter proof dynamic duo. As I was preparing for the podcast, I was thinking to myself, what are the themes that I could use as a little bit of an icebreaker? And Rohan and Fabian are dual CEOs, dual founders of their business. And I wondered, is that common? Helmet and I have also started this joint venture, this writing collaboration. But I sort of kind of reflected on the whole idea of partnerships in business. And in some senses, partnerships are not new. You think of McKinsey, you think of Goldman Sachs, you think of all of the accounting firms, you think of all the law firms. So I suppose to reinforce that, there's this big quote from Aristotle that says, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That's the aspiration when we think about partnerships. But business and life generally, there is very much the cult of personality, the idea that there is some sort of guru, some brilliant mind that we should celebrate. And I place as examples here Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or someone that Helmet and I have worked closely with, Mukesh Ambani, who get this extraordinary reflected glow of genius. And I think we get sucked into that cult where there is an individual that is the champion, an individual that is the one brilliant entrepreneurial mind. And I wondered why that was, because my experience recently with Dr. Schuster and Oxley has been that that's not the case. I think about how our writing venture works, and I'm wondering if this is similar for Rohan and Fabian, but I don't know I could do it on my own. There's so many insecurities and anxieties about writing, whether it's any good. The journey is very long. Writing a book takes a year. Then you've got to get it out there and face whatever the decisions or reflections are of getting the book out there. It's a very emotionally fraught period of time. And there are doubts along the way. And I don't know I could do it on my own. Helmet and I sort of lift one another up when one of us is down. The other sort of lifts them up somehow. And I think, we bounce off of one another. And it seems to me that experience is very different to what I think I experienced in the corporate world. In the corporate world, I came across shared leadership as a concept in India, interestingly, about 10 years ago. And I remember thinking, I don't see how shared leadership works in a corporate setting. Because we talk about, well, who decides if no one decides? This idea that if you don't have a single individual who's accountable for the decision, then there's just finger pointing and chaos. Now, I was embroiled in things like delegations of authority and job descriptions and the Hay ranking system for how jobs should be coded. And so this is all built on who's the boss. And I reflected on, why are we wrapped up in this? Charlie Munger we recently lost Charlie Munger, but he talked about how all the best decisions were basically arguments at Berkshire, and how he did it in partnership, how they did it as a duo. And then there's Larry Page and Sergey Brin, who said, working together, we push each other to think bigger and go further than we would on our own. And I start to resonate a little bit more with this sense of being in partnership with someone who's complementary. But I think the trick here is it's got to be someone that you respect, and that there's got to be a cause or a purpose that you're jointly in pursuit of, that allows you to leave behind all of these sort of petty politics and this idea of gamesmanship or one-upmanship, or heaven forbid, the whole game theory business that seems to invade a lot of corporate life. What are your reflections?
Yeah, I mean, I can only reflect that. I mean, I think even those who remember only the Steve Jobs actually began as a team of two, or three in many cases. We should never forget that. And even like in current reality, you do have CEOs, but you have like the CFO. Every British board has like a CEO and a CFO on the main board. I think normally, and that's something made in heaven, if there's a team of two that really just can relate to each other in a very, very positive way. And that's why I think what Fabian and Rohan actually accomplished schoolmates, and then they found each other with a shared purpose. And David, you rightly said shared purpose is very, very important. Yeah. And their shared purpose was no more hangovers in the morning. And so they created like a quartet. I think that's actually great. Yeah. But But I equally believe, and I still remember one thing. I was in the army, and we had a general, and he said, like, a single man is a coward, but two guys make heroes. And I think that's probably very true, because you are there to lift, the other one up if something is not going right. So I fully agree with your story here, David.
Yes. So let me introduce Rohan, and we'll turning over to Helmut to put him through his paces with the cunning questions. Started in corporate strategy and commercial roles. He's collaborated with us on our books. He was a large part of a Groundhog career where he was featured and joined us for the launch of that book, and was brilliant in talking about his own career experience. He has now founded and co-founded the Quarter Proof low alcohol spirits brand, built with his childhood friend, someone he's known since the age of 11, Fabian Clark, and served as the best man at his wedding, cheered him on virtually for the New York Marathon this last weekend. Based in the UK. It's been a pleasure working with you, Rohan, but let me see if Helmut can tease out a little more background. Helmut, over to you.
Yeah, this is really just a bit of fun. Yeah, the first thing I would like to really, what is your favorite book if you have time to read these days?
So I like, obviously, to read books that relate to what we're trying to do. One really obvious example of in the business world was Phil Knight's Shoe Dog. I think that's one where, again, I don't necessarily like to read business books where I have to study in great detail. It's more I like to relate to the stories of great journeys that founders have been on. And then probably related to what I'm going to talk about later, but I'm currently reading a book called The Shortest History of India, which is actually turning out to be rather a long read, but there's a lot there. So I'm very interested in history. I obviously love to read about founder journeys and then take learnings from that in terms of what we're trying to build as well.
Yeah, great. The other question is, like, I think when you start a company and you had a kind of a corporate career, so we're not always a founder, who are the people or the person you basically thought you could learn from as a founder, startup entrepreneur? Who do you admire?
I think I tried to take very direct learnings and experience from people in our space. So when I was consulting for brands that had started before us, and then subsequently since we launched, there are brands that are 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead of where we are. So I looked to spend time with them and really try and draw as much experience out from people that had trodden that path ahead of us.
Okay, cool. So the thing is now, and I hope Fabian is going to watch this podcast, if you had to say what is your superpower and what is Fabian's superpower in this partnership, business partnership?
Yeah, it's funny what you were saying at the start about partnership and co-foundership. I definitely couldn't have done this without him. Answer your question directly. His superpower, I think, is attacking a long list of tasks and jobs very systematically, very, very efficiently, and getting a lot of things done in a timely manner, which is why he works, in the back end of the business as such, on operations, logistics, finance. He deals with our distillery. He's moving product all over the world. If you gave me that list of things to do, it would take me months, and he can do it in weeks, days, minutes, etc. And then on my side, I would say, well, proof will be in the pudding later, but storytelling, engaging partners on what we're building, the journey, the mission we're on. And that's why I kind of cover more of the brand sales marketing side, so the front end of the business. And I think we really mesh together as complementary skill sets. And I think I'm in awe of solo founders in our space, because I don't understand how there's enough time in the day to handle all of those things I just talked about across both what Fabian and I do. As an example, he's just moved to America. So yesterday he was visiting our distillery there, where he's tasting the new liquids that we're going to be producing in that market. At the same time, I'm in Amsterdam meeting potential distributors in Europe, all on the same day. And if you're one person, that's going to take 2 days or a week or a month to do all of that. And I think we do really pick each other up when things don't go our way, and also G each other up, for great opportunities. But we're lucky. I think other founders I've heard and seen examples where they have the same skill sets and they have the same interests, and then there's a clash because ego comes into it. I want to be the one who's leading the pitch. I want to be the one who's doing the branding design. I'm the one who wants to do the liquid development. And if you both want to do those things, you're just going to clash constantly. Whereas he's got his set list of things to do, I've got my set list of things to do. And of course, we get to collaborate within that. But I think it's about finding people that have the skills and expertise that you don't have, and vice versa.
Excellent. And last question, and that's probably your favorite question. What is your favorite drink?
My favorite drink, I love a martini. I love a martini, and we've just launched a new 3 martini lunch menu at the Four Seasons, which is really cool because
Wow.
I'd long ago banned myself from drinking full strength martinis because I'm not a big drinker, and it didn't agree with me to take on that much alcohol, even if I loved the ritual, the flavor, the serve, and the whole experience of it. And now to be able to do it at mid strength is bringing back this nostalgic time of being able to enjoy something that is, it feels fun, it feels hedonistic, but it's only half the strength. So yeah, I love a martini.
Okay, thank you for that. Before I hand over to Dave, just one thing I want to say is that of all the companies we've invested in, the two of you are, for me, the perfect co-founder combination. Because as you rightly said, you are not competing in this ego space, and I think that is your combined superpower. David,
lovely.
over to you now.
Well, really just to ask Rohan to share his story. We ask our guests to come on and share a story that is personal to them, that has been a source of inspiration or a source of strength in their professional lives or in their lives more generally. Are you ready to go ahead and regale us with a story?
Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily call it a story because it's non-fiction in the sense that this was what I wrote my dissertation on at university, a topic that I really wanted to dive into because my heritage is that I'm half Indian, half English. So my father is Indian, my mother is English. And my father grew up in India and met my mother over here, at university. So when I got to my dissertation studying history, I wanted to dive into Indian history and find out more about how, the British and the impact of the British. Half of my family bloodline had shaped the country and obviously, created opportunities for people like my father to move here and for me to exist. And what I cleverly did was link this to one of my great passions, which is cricket. And so this isn't a story about cricket, so don't worry. But I called it Over the Boundary because what I researched and argued was that the introduction of cricket, the sport, to India by the British helped bring about the independence movement and really united the country alongside Gandhi and the independence movement that led up to independence in 1947. And what's really interesting about it is in Bombay at the time, there's this great cricketing field called the Maidan where there are multiple gymkhanas, and gymkhanas are sports clubs. And at the time you had a Hindu gymkhana, you had a Muslim gymkhana, you had a Parsi gymkhana, you had a British gymkhana, you had different caste systems within that. And basically all of these different groups were very split up and they weren't really able to engage and unite. And that was how the British wanted it. But there was a moment when the Indian gymkhanas, all the subsets came together to form a national identity, a national 11. And they ended up defeating the British, who were their oppressors. And it was the first time, they had come together as an Indian nation in a sporting context to beat the British, who had obviously controlled the country for so long. And this was a really amazing story. There's a beautiful Bollywood film about it called Lagan as well. But I think for me, not that it's necessarily a story as such, but the journey that they went on alongside the independence movement is something that obviously really fascinated me and really, I think, helped me to understand more about who I am, where I've come from. And, because even on my mother's side, my grandfather had spent time with the British Army in India. So I had this really rich mix of cultures coming together. And that was something that I, was passionate about to research and to learn and to write up on. So I wanted to share that.
It's an amazing story. I have to ask a couple of questions, though. You chose it because of a desire to retrace history a little bit, or to understand your own heritage?
Yeah, exactly. I think, I was born here, but I have a huge Indian family. Many relatives still live there and a lot of relatives here. So I grew up understanding, both cultures, but with an opportunity like studying history, where you can choose whatever subject you want to really dive into. I chose that as a period of history and obviously of a time and a location that I could learn more about, myself and my roots and how my father ended up here and how I ended up here.
Do you think it was easier doing that as your dissertation at school because of your interest in it? Because I think very often we're asked to pursue academic studies that are very abstract, but did it help you that it had meaning?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, obviously linking it to a great passion of mine, with cricket, my father's cricket mad. He named his 3 sons all after Indian cricketers. So this was a long time coming. It was natural that I wanted to dive back into to learn more about the history of Indian cricket, but then how I learned that the country coming together for the first time, really, that through something like sport, they could unite alongside people that they had been sort of forced to hate or not interact with for the greater good of freedom. I think was a really amazing story, and it's it was something that I loved learning about. And I think naturally, if at university you can choose whatever you want to write your thesis on, it definitely helped to spend hours reading and learning about, a passion of mine, as well as something that was personally connected to my heritage.
And
Okay.
before I pass it over to Helmet, the question of did the research and the experience of working on that subject at university, has it resonated? Have there been echoes throughout professional life of any of the aspects, either of the story or of working on something that you have a particular vested interest in?
I think there are obviously elements of what I've described there that I think ring true in personal life, professional life, but you mentioned it at the very beginning. The collaboration and coming together with others is greater than trying to master things completely on your own. I think an example I'd give is in our category of drinks, it can be quite dog eat dog. Everyone's very competitive with one another. Who's winning the listings? Who's the biggest? Who has the biggest team? Who's making the most sales? And in order to raise awareness as a collective, we created a collective of brands all within our categories so that we could activate together, we could run press campaigns together, we could formalize our language so that the consumer understands it's clearer. We could have decided to go out on our own and try and build awareness as one, but we created a collective of 30 to 40 brands. And, as they say, coming together like that is going to create a swell that's far greater than what we could have done on our own. So I think, it's about collaboration. It's about working with people that you probably thought were your enemy or your competition, because there's a greater good at the end of that, which is what we're actually all striving for. But I think there is a similarity there, but that's a common theme throughout everything that you want to work on if you've got a great purpose to deliver something.
Yeah.
Well,
Helmet, over to you.
yeah, Rohan. I mean, for me, your story is very much about like together. That amazing things can happen when you join forces and do things together. How does that actually manifest yourself in your business relationship? Because for me, Fabe in many ways is quintessentially British English, yeah? And for me, you bring a very broader perspective, diversity perspective to the party. And I think that's very, very paramount for like every good business to have this broader horizon.
Yeah, for sure. I think as a business to succeed, you have to work with many different entities in many different locations and engage with people from all different backgrounds. And so, for us, like I say, dealing in multiple markets, I think it's important to have a broad perspective as to how certain cultures operate. And it would be narrow-minded for us just to think that the UK and what we do here is the only way or the only opportunity. So I think we'll see. Fabian's moved to the US now, so he'll be learning more about that culture, and vice versa with what we're doing in Europe or wherever else in Asia. And for us to grow to the level that we want to, we're naturally going to be engaging with a whole variety of individuals and nationalities and business cultures, and very much looking forward to that.
Other question I had: how much is actually the relevance of sports? So how important do you think it is to do like sports, competitive sports? I know that Fabian is a very keen runner and a very good runner. You love cricket and I think too many other things as well. Do you I mean, I find that really interesting when I look at some of the co-founders I know, or founders. Most of them have a competitive sports background. In our case, David is very, very competitive. Now he's basically a very keen golfer. I used to be a competitive swimmer. I do believe this competitive edge with discipline is quite important for founders or co-founders.
Yeah, I'd say there's a lot of similarities. I think in terms of practicing the sport, like we were talking about, whether it's an individual sport like swimming, if you're a F1 driver, you have a team around you. So I think there's always there's a greater collective there to empower you to do well. But I think the reason why we definitely are competitive, because I think if you don't have a competitive edge, then you're not really waking up in the morning wanting to really build something interesting. So I think that definitely feeds into that mindset, and probably why a lot of people that you've met have that link to either still training hard, still practicing sport, because I think you're always trying to better yourself and develop whatever it is, your business or you personally. And I think those things run in parallel. And I think it's also probably something you can measure. So whether it's golf, you're trying to get your handicap down. With your swimming, you're trying to hit a time. With us, we're trying to hit a monthly target. What are the things that we're doing? What's the rhythm of how we practice to build those blocks? I think it's all completely aligned.
Okay, excellent. David?
I really think there's depth to this story, the dissertation summary. The idea of being splintered and parochial, of inward looking, of being fixated by what we don't like about one another, our differences, and over a period of time rallying around some common cause. And there's something about that I find incredibly powerful. I think of all the years that we worked in corporate life, Helmut, how so often people descended into what's in it for me. Let's go and fix this problem, but what's in it for me? Why would I do that? And I find that is just a very human thing. I don't say it to be mean to anyone or suggest that it's a flaw. I think we all have it in us, that sense of, whether it be mercenary or whether it just be a sense of, I'd rather not have to work harder. Why do I really need to do it? What's in it for me? I don't think that's an unnatural thing. It's a natural instinct. Trying to find that thing that inspires people to do something together. And we said this a little bit with the intro, finding something that is sufficiently powerful that it elevates people's sight, elevates their objectives to something that is beyond them personally, that goes beyond their own personal sense of enrichment or personal sense of wants, to something that's greater, and we talk a lot about purpose, cause, finding something that really inspires you to get after it. I think it's really hard in business. So often, even when we start off saying no more hangovers, it still descends into, well, show me your quarterly numbers. I need to get an investor on board, and they've got, various eccentricities about what they want to see. And you get caught in that tactical administrative trap that starts to descend things into the tyranny of day-to-day tasks. What are your reflections on that, Rohan?
I think it's a really important challenge for, building your team is the most important part of growing the company, because just the two of us on our own, it's not possible for us to achieve our ambitions. I think, especially now as we're building, we've got teams in America, in Australia, and building in the UK. It's what is our ambition as a company, and I think we really want to have an impact on culture. We want to change the way the world drinks, and I think that then filters through to, if I've just joined the team, I'm thinking, okay, if I work for this company for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I could forever say I was involved in changing a movement that had an impact on society, as opposed to, as you were referring to, doing something because it's just only going to personally, impact me, whether in the short term or medium term. And I think it's perhaps something that we haven't nailed to date, but absolutely part of the next phase of the business, I think, is rallying around a united purpose that's greater than us just hitting a target each year, because I think that really does personally excite people, and it makes them think, what does my career journey look like, and which stories do I want to be involved with? So yeah, I think it's a big challenge, but I think it will make all the difference if you have people engaged at that level.
What do you think, Helmut?
A question which is really, because in many ways you decided not only to create a new product, you decided to play in a new category. So there was no such thing like low alcohol spirits. And in many ways, David and I created something where there's no category as well. We combined fiction with career advice, and we find it very hard to be understood what we're actually doing and in which box or drawer we fit. And this is a huge education effort. And our advisors at Amazon, they always tell us, wow, that's really complicated, because people decide in 30 seconds who you are and what you are. And, they can't be categorized as quickly as it normally takes to make a purchase decision. And you must have exactly the same. Yeah. Did you fully understand that the product was great, but creating a new category was just huge?
Absolutely. And what you just described there, to me, rings true with your own journey. And I think, but it only excites me, because when people don't know what box to put you in, that's because you've created a unique angle and a unique opportunity. So, you could say that about so many categories that now exist in everyday life, like milk alternatives. When you go and order a coffee, they say, what milk would you like? 10 years ago, no one knew what soy milk, oat milk, pea milk was. And now you have to be asked it as a matter of, every single time. So we definitely probably didn't acknowledge how big a challenge it would be to educate, on a whole new category. But that's also why we wanted to collaborate with our peers to raise the tide together. Yeah, I think, but I would always say it's our greatest challenge, but our greatest opportunity is that we were the first to go out there and do it. So there's going to be a lot of people that say, I don't know which shelf to put you on. I don't know which menu to put you on. I don't know which bucket to put you in. But then you could just create your own bucket and be like, this is a whole new space, and that's for us to own now. So yeah, it's harder. I think it's definitely more enjoyable, and it gives you have more hunger than if we were in a completely saturated market where you're just vying for space that's incredibly competitive. But yeah.
There's a generational thing here as well. One of the things that we've often been asked to talk about as we've been on the writing journey is generational differences. The idea that Generation Z look at the professional world very differently to the baby boomer population and the ones in between. And there's some truth in it. The judgment about whether it's better or worse we think is false. But the notion of saying that the Generation Z millennial population are not satisfied simply by a good job, a well-paid job. There is a desire for there to be some cause, purpose, or explanation as to why it matters. Some people are challenged by that in the sense that when someone says, but why should I do this? Why does it matter? They see it as well, just get on and do it because I told you. But it's an inquiry about what's the purpose, what's the broader goal here that we're trying to achieve. I don't know that that's a bad thing necessarily. And it comes back to this question of how do you elevate work to be something more meaningful than just a paycheck? What do you think?
I totally agree. I think I'm now 37. I had a lot of friends that probably went down career paths because they had seen generations above them do it, and they just thought that's what they were meant to do, and that it would set them up for a great life. Whether I'd ask all of them if it's something that has true meaning to them or not, I'm not sure the majority would necessarily say it does. And I can totally see why now younger people coming into a professional environment will look at it and think, well, if I'm going to spend the majority of my life doing this, I've got to first and foremost be passionate about it. I think that will only help people to create meaningful things and be involved in journeys that will fulfill them, as opposed to just doing what they feel like they have to do, or that they feel like is the only way to get along or to get to where, success is.
Helmut, anything else?
Yeah, I mean, no, I was just thinking about one thing. Question asked Fabian, I think a few months ago, and asked her the same question. And then I tell you what Fabian told me, your partner,
Right.
business partner. So if this goes wrong, what is your plan B? I mean, you're just married, you want to have a family. So if this doesn't go the way you want it to go, what is your plan B?
Well, I never really think about a plan B, because I think it's just wasted energy, especially where we are right now in the thick of all of the most exciting things happening. But I also think the journey we've been on, even 4 years in, there's some statistics about how few businesses last this long. I think what we've learned in this time, even if I had to move on to start something else after, or go and work for somebody else, this journey has taught incredible amount about the space I want to operate in. So I think I've got value to add elsewhere, but I don't think about a plan B, because it's, as I said, negative energy, and it's wasted thought on an outcome that we're gonna avoid. But yeah, I think we're interested to know what Fabian said.
Well, 10 out of 10, he said exactly the same. When I asked him the
Cool.
question, his eyes widened. I said, what do you mean a plan B? No, I
Yeah.
don't have a plan B. This is going to work. And I was so impressed. Failure is just not an option. And I think that makes a great company, that makes a great business, that makes great founders. I really believe you're doing very well.
Thank you.
David.
So let me segue. Helmut's going to ask you a question in a moment, which we ask all our guests to share their answers. But let me just do this initially. So, very nicely done. It's mainly for my benefit that I play with the sound effects on the podcast software. It's a lot of fun. Helmut, over to you.
Yeah, no, Rohan, we always ask one question, because after all, we write about careers, we write about leadership. If there's one advice you had to give, like the generation of 20 and 30s, what would it be? Career advice, leadership advice? What's the one thing?
I was interviewed recently, and I was asked a similar question, and I credited my father for this advice, but I'm now wondering whether it was him or not. But let's roll with it. He's said very similar things to me over the years, but he always said, if you don't back yourself, nobody else will. And I think whenever you go into any environment, whether it's, social, professional, if you're pitching for something, if you're trying to win something, you need to go in with a mindset that you're prepared, you're confident, you know what you're doing. And I think that I would always repeat that to myself before I do anything that's going to require me to be in a particular flow state or zone. I spoke on a panel yesterday, and you can get nerves, or you can feel like, oh, have I prepared for that? But you've just got to have that mindset, and to have a front that people can feed off that energy. And I know it's not necessarily possible for everybody to feel that way all the time, but I think if you're where you're meant to be, then you should go out and deliver it, because you've worked hard to put yourself in that position. So at that stage, you've got to back yourself, because the energy is picked up by everyone around you.
What is it? The Andy Grove quote: "Your success, your career is literally your own responsibility, or your one job." Excellent. That was great. So let me wrap up a couple of things about Quarter Proof that I think are worth sharing. One of which is that you had a famous Dragon's Den appearance that we should reference here, where you were inundated with offers, but turned them down and said, no, we'll go our own way. We're just equally as good as you dragons. We don't need any of you. So what's the truth of that? I think I've just made some of that up.
No, that was pretty much bang on. Yeah, I think we sort of how to play the game, as it were, that the show is a great marketing and PR exercise for fledgling businesses as much as it is for the dragons themselves to promote their own personas and profile. So we managed to achieve a 10-minute long feature where we had, hard negotiation with a couple of the dragons on a deal, and then, as you say, turned it down. But as an experience, it was, as I said earlier, about backing yourself and putting yourself in difficult situations. That was definitely one of the more nervous I've ever been. But, 4 million people saw our business, within a few months of us launching, and that's all free. And you can imagine how much it would cost to achieve that through other forms of advertising and digital marketing, etc. And, actually, interestingly, we a few years later created a relationship with some investors that had become lifelong fans of the product and regular D2C customers, and they saw us on Dragon's Den 3-4 years ago. So putting yourself out there is really, really valuable for many reasons.
Where can people go and buy Quarter Proof? Where can they drink it?
We just launched actually into Sainsbury's this week, which is a big new listing. You can also find us on Ocado, Amazon, and in bars, restaurants, hotels across the country. So you just got to look out for a mid-strength section for cocktails, and you should see us down there.
And who's the most famous drinker of Quarter Proof? Do you have a fame?
After Helmet, I'd say we have a interesting investor who is probably one of the most, well, he's a customer, but an investor who's probably one of the most famous sports people in their field. Probably the most famous and most acclaimed sports person in their field. It's an individual sport, so I'll leave you with that, and you can try and figure it out.
Not going to name it. I was going to say it did appear in a Korea book, Shay Sinop's favorite drink in Artificial Death of a Korea.
Of course.
Yes.
I think it is in a couple of our books. I think it might have been in a Groundhog Korea also. You possibly sold 2 or 3 bottles as a consequence.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send you the commission.
Let me wrap up our podcast, Helmet. Anything else that you'd like to ask?
No, just the only thing, question is the big thank you. You know how much I respect you and Fabian and what you do. So thank you for joining us on this podcast.
Anything else you'd like to share, Rohan?
No, just to thank you guys for similarly wanting to collaborate and provide a platform for us to share stories, experiences. I think it's always great fun, and really appreciate the opportunity to be involved. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. So as I close this podcast, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please check out all the others that we have. There are 25, 26 now on our platform. We also have a lot of content on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn. Our website is award-winning. Finally, this is something Helmet insists I say. I don't know why he delegates it to me to say it, but if you enjoyed this podcast, we guarantee you will love the books. So check out the 3 books that are out there. We'll provide you with a link. That is all from me. Helmet, goodbye.
Goodbye, auf Wiedersehen und Servus. Tschüss.